online information session for Malmo Plains neighborhood renewal now. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the pre-construction online information session for Malmo Plains. My name is Jennifer. I'm with ISL Engineering and Land Services, and I am pleased to be your host for this session. Today, we will be sharing pre-construction information for Malmo Plains neighborhood renewal. A bit of a summary. Today, we are sharing information about the neighborhood renewal project, how we got here today, what construction will look like in your community starting this spring, and the local improvement process. We will answer as many questions as we can during this 90-minute session. Our panelists have opened up their schedules to continue this session for about 15 to 20 minutes if we need more time. But before we get to the information, let's go over some housekeeping items. We are recording this session and we'll post one of the sessions that we've hosted this week to the website for community members who are not able to attend today's session. For the question and answer section of the presentation, we will be using the Q&A tool in Zoom and questions that are submitted at registration. On your screen, you will see the Q&A icon. By clicking on that icon, you can type in your questions for the project team. We'll take about 20 minutes at the end of the construction presentation to answer any questions you may have, and then we'll continue on with the local improvement section. At the end of that, we'll take about 10 to 15 minutes to ask any of those questions and whatever questions we didn't get to in the construction section. We also have a couple community members joining us by phone this evening. You should be able to follow along with the paper copies that were delivered to your place earlier this week. Now I'd like to introduce the project team at this time and invite them to say hello. First, we've got Josh with the city.
Good evening, everyone.
Next, Jason. He's the delivery program manager from the city of Edmonton.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining.
And Ludmilla, the local improvements administrator with the city of Edmonton.
Good night.
From ISL Engineering and Land Services, we have Tony, the general manager for transportation.
Everybody, welcome. Thanks for coming.
And Nick with the transportation team for ISL.
Hello, everyone.
We also have a number of people working from the project team working in the background to ensure this event runs smoothly. So thank you to all our panelists and project team members for being here today. We will see our panelists back on screen in time for the presentations and the question and answer section. Now let's move on and review how we got here. Beginning in this spring, Malmo Plains will experience neighborhood renewal. The neighborhood renewal program will rehabilitate roads, replace street lights, curbs and gutters, repair sidewalks, and connect missing sidewalk links where possible in Malmo Plains. Neighborhood renewal also includes opportunities to improve city-owned park spaces and public spaces. Since 2019, the project team has worked with the public to create the final designs. All of the steps along the way and the final designs are available on the project webpage. Did you know at public engagement events, your role varies depending on the level of influence and feedback we have for the designs decisions being made? The neighborhood renewal program follows this map. The journey for Malmo Plains started in June 2019, where we introduced the project and asked the community to help create the vision and guiding principles. In July and September 2019, we explored opportunities and challenges within Malmo Plains. We asked the community to help us refine our understanding about potential improvements around the neighborhood. In January 2020, we asked the community to help refine the design options being considered. We shared the benefits and trade-offs for the options that were developed based on opportunities shared in the previous stages. In June, we moved to online engagement only. We asked the community to help refine the final draft design. Over the summer and fall, the community engaged in the streetlight expression of interest, and the project team moved the draft design into final design. In October, we invited the public to advise on the final designs for Malmo Plains and asked if they aligned with the vision and guiding principles we co-created at the beginning of this process. With planning and design phases now complete, today we are here to help you prepare for construction in Malmo Plains. The construction will start this spring. We have information about what construction will look like in your community and in front of your house, and we will share the local improvement process. And finally, construction will take place over 2 years, starting this spring and wrapping up in fall 2021. Let's take a look at the project map and go over where you will see some changes other than road and sidewalk constructions in front of your home. There are changes made to the park spaces and the berm, shown in light and dark green, adding and enhancing the green spaces that already are a part of Malmo Plains. Sidewalk improvements and traffic calming measures in Malmo Plains and at 51st Avenue are shown in red. A renewed and new shared use path and the White Mud Bridge connection are shown in blue. New pavement treatments to the alleys near the LRT station in yellow, and changes to 115th Street in purple by adding a shared use path along the west side of the street. For more details on the final design, please visit the website at edmonton.ca/building Malmo Plains. Now, before I hand things over to Joshua, I would like to remind you to add your questions to the Q&A tool throughout the presentation. We have a team working in the background that are monitoring your questions. As they come in, the team members will dismiss the questions once they have added them to our list for our project team to answer during the Q&A session. So now Joshua will walk you through what to expect in front of your home during construction. Joshua.
Thanks, Jen. Once again, hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Schmaltz, and I am the Delivery Project Manager for the City of Edmonton for the Malmo Plains project. And just for our friends on the phone, the slide we're on right now it just says construction, and it's on the green City of Edmonton background, just so you know where you're at, since you can't see it live on the internet here. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the construction process, I just want to touch upon a few design-related items from the last public engagement session that have changed a bit or have matured in some way since the last update. Following that, I'll go through the construction process step by step so you can get an idea of what to expect when the renewal work gets underway in front of your property. So once I get through that construction bit, we will pause for a few minutes for the first round of construction related questions. And after that, we'll have another short talk about how the local improvements process works. So if you can advance the slide for me here, Jen. Be my Vanna White this evening. Thank you. So just to kind of touch on some previous things, probably the biggest change we're seeing in Malmo Plains is the reconfiguration of the intersections around the park at 49th Avenue and Malmo Road. We've spoken to the owners on the north little curb extension there to talk about different landscaping options and kind of configuration details that affect their property. And if you are one of the south homeowners affected by this and you're on this call, or maybe they're your neighbors or you know who they are, we'd like to connect with you so we can chat, kind of have the same discussion with you about what happens with that new curb extension in front of your property. And just with respect to the photo on the right, just kind of a conceptual illustration of the curb extensions. Once again, the intent of these things is to try to slow traffic down a bit, make it easier for pedestrians to get across the road. It does lead to a net loss of a couple parking spots across the neighborhood, but not in any significant amount. And really, they're only planned for what we call the busier intersections within the neighborhood, generally along Malmo Road, 115th Street, and a few other locations. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, curb types. So the existing curbs in Malmo Plains are an older style rolled face curb, which the City of Edmonton doesn't use anymore. The new curbs are going to be a mix of straight face, which is an example shown on the left, and a newer style rolled face curb as per the photo on the right. Now, straight face curb is usually a little bit better for snow clearing because there's a defined edge, and it also allows for some flexibility in adding new asphalt to the road in the future, since we can pave on that flat part without having to take out any asphalt across the entire road. So the idea is it can save a few dollars down the road. Now, obviously, if you have a front driveway, we will add what's called a drop curb, which is effectively a kind of a modified version of the rolled face curb that you can drive over. We're not going to make someone drive over this huge ledge to get into their driveway. Now, rolled face curbs are going to be used in locations where the drainage patterns might make the height of the straight face curb not feasible in terms of making sure rainwater and whatnot can keep flowing off your property. Now, we don't know exactly where the rolled face and straight face curb are going to go in the neighborhood. That is being determined as part of the field design process, which is currently in progress, where we essentially make sure the new roadway design elevations are going to match up with everyone's front yards and not create any drainage issues. Okay, next slide, please, Jen. Thank you. All right, so the White Mud Drive bridge connection and little park. Here's an updated rendering of that area. And what has changed since last time, and this is still sort of dynamic, but what's changed since last time is we've are going to remove that old stairwell that's kind of to the south and to the east corner of things. And that allows us to reconfigure this ramp to reduce its overall slope or its steepness. The chain link fence that is there is going to be removed, and the railing will go probably to be replaced with a different section of railing in a slightly different alignment. We're still working on that. And you'll see along the south side, we're also looking to reconfigure the sidewalk that used to run to those stairs to run under the bridge and sort of formalize that the turkey trail or the path or the desire line, whichever term you want to use for it, to allow you to pass basically from the east to the west, kind of as a lot of cyclists do right now anyway. There's also a plan to add a bit of lighting to this park to make it more functional in the evening. And of course, all these changes, like there's some risk to a few trees. So the intention is to preserve the majority of the mature trees in this park. There are a few smaller trees that get disturbed as part of the ramp reconstruction, but we have new landscaping planned to more than offset those changes. Now, the design work for this little pocket park is still in progress, and it is still subject to City of Edmonton funding. The plan for construction for this area is not until 2022. Next slide, Jen, please. All right, so the Lendrum shared use path up along 115th Street. So here is a rendering that ISL put together for us, kind of showing a conceptual view of what it'll look looking to the north. The joke I make is that I would have asked ISL to insert Bernie Sanders in his chair into this photo somewhere, but the city comms people told me to stop screwing around. So you'll have to use your imagination. But nonetheless, the city has identified a missing link along 115th Street in Lendrum Place for pedestrians, cyclists, etc. So the idea here is to improve the existing pathway or desire line running along this west side of 115th Street by constructing a new asphalt pathway through the area. Now, the new path is intended to be offset from the existing curb by a few meters, as you see by the landscape boulevard we've shown there, but the alignment will be adjusted in spots to avoid any disruption to the existing mature trees on the edge of the U of A farm property. So in some spots, it may get tighter to the curb, but the intent obviously is to protect the existing mature tree stand. Further to that, if you recall, there's no photo, but the pedestrian lights that allow you to cross 51st Avenue, pretty much between Malmo and Lendrum there, are currently on the east side of that intersection. The plan is to relocate those signals to the west side, and when combined with the new shared use path on 115th Street and Malmo Plains, will create a continuous walking, cycling, any wheeled mode of transportation, human powered, between the U of A South Campus, Malmo Plains, and the White Mud Pedestrian Bridge, and to points beyond. Once again, the design discussion is still in progress on this particular element. Same goes with the funding considerations, and this is not planned to proceed until 2022. Okay, thanks, Jen. Next slide. Okay, so now we'll get into the more of the new stuff, the construction stuff, starting with access closures. So the city's intent is to eliminate unused or non-compliant accesses during neighborhood renewal. This flows from the mature neighborhood overlay within the city's zoning bylaw, which is an entire presentation itself, so we won't get too much into that. But generally, this is not applicable to most residents in this neighborhood. The letters have been sent out to the affected owners, and members of the project team, potentially myself as well, will ultimately reach out to discuss further options. In some cases, we have the ability to say if your front drive is disused, but you still would like to maintain a connection to your front door, we could perhaps take out the old driveway and put in a connector or like a private sidewalk to replace it. But that's all case by case. I would just say, please get in touch with me or someone on the project team if you want to discuss your driveway closure letter in more detail, or if you still have other questions. All right, Jen, next slide, please. So just to keep the guys on the phone in line, the slide we're on is called prior to road construction, and there's a picker truck or a truck or the guy clipping the trees on as the photo on it. But anyways, so in Malmo, the utility work is generally complete. If you recall seeing the new water lines that went in last summer, there will be some tree pruning that gets completed. Properties that are affected will get a letter from the city. In the event that there are potentially more significant impacts to trees on your property, the project team, again, probably myself and someone from the city's forestry team, will arrange a meeting with you in some form here, either virtually or socially distanced. There are a couple of trees that are at risk in Malmo, but our intention is to work around them without causing damage to them as much as is possible. Another thing you'll start seeing happening pretty soon is that new streetlights will start being installed, and you'll probably see streetlight work happening all throughout the summer. We are requiring that the contractor provides some form of street lighting at all times, so there should be no dark nights on your street. Another thing you'll see is that the project team will come through and document all existing driveways and connector sidewalks, or private sidewalks, another way to call that. And we will match the existing materials of the hard surfacing in your yard. So if you have a paver stone driveway now, you will have paver stones afterward, even if we disturb a piece. Now, if you've got, this is not an order to move things, but if you have something planted within about 2 meters or say about 6 feet of the back of the existing city sidewalk, and you'd like to protect it, like a shrub or something, we'd ask that you would move it out of the way in the spring. If you have things that are more difficult to move, like maybe rocks or larger shrubs or something, the contractor and the project team can get in touch with you. We'll work out a way to work around these things. But if you have stuff that's quite easy to get out of the way, we would ask that you look into that in the spring. Now, another item that's a possible disruption here is if you have underground sprinkler lines that are right up against the back of the sidewalk, we will temporarily have to take them out of service during construction. Our contractor will come and repair and restore those lines after the new sidewalks are completed. But I'll just say that sprinkler repairs sometimes take a while to get done because the subcontractor obviously wants to work on multiple properties at once, and that may require several blocks of new sidewalk to be complete before they come out. So if you're the first one, we got to wait for the last guy, it could take a bit of time. So we just ask you to bear with us in that manner. Next slide, please, Jen. So, all right, removal of sidewalk. So how it works is the contractor will work on one side of the road at a time to reduce the disruption to residents. Temporary sign will go up in advance, and the contractor will deliver notices to the immediate affected residents. You're going to get several notices over the course of construction. And as part of this process, we will also remove portions of driveways and connector or private sidewalks at this time. The exact amount we take from each property will vary based on the grading design and the existing surface drainage patterns in the area. We walk through the area before doing any work, and we usually paint the removal limits on any concrete items on your property. There is no additional cost to the property owner beyond the local improvements, which we'll get into a little bit later, for any of the city specified concrete replacement work that happens inside your property. Now, as a side note, if you're looking to replace your entire driveway or other parts of your connector walk, etc., you are welcome to reach out to our contractor through the contact information they will provide with their notices to arrange this work with them directly. The city is not involved in this, these private deals in any form, but the cost of this work to you may be slightly lower since they're already out in the neighborhood, and you can very much take advantage of the volume discount of the amount of work being done. But again, that is a separate arrangement, and the city is not involved in that. Next slide, please, Jen. Cool. So yeah, sidewalk construction. So once the old sidewalks are removed, and say, for example, if you look at the left photo, you kind of see, I said 2 meters as the warning area for things that might be in the way. Like there, maybe they've gone back a foot or 2 feet. So they're not going to go back that full distance, but it's just sort of a safety cushion. But you kind of see the amount of disruption to the front lawn that occurs when we do new sidewalks. But so what happens is that sidewalks are built 2 different ways. One with a machine pour using a string line, which is what is shown in that left photo. The little poles with the line running between them is a string line. And then the more traditional way and the more labor intensive way is to use formworks, which is what you'll see on the right. Machine pouring is a quite a bit more efficient process, as you will see when they're out working on site. Next slide, please. So I'll just say now, if the contractor sets up a string line in your property, please don't move it or disturb it in any way. It's usually only there for a few days, as long as it doesn't rain a whole bunch or something. So if you witness some damage to the string line before the new walks have been poured, you can let me know, let the contractor know. It's, pardon me, usually a very easy fix. It just has to be done before the walk is poured because it sets the final grade line or the drainage direction of the sidewalk. Now, if you have mobility issues and you need continuous access to the front of your property, please reach out to the project team and we can make arrangements to either leave a gap in the string line or have the contractor provide a ramp. There are plenty of options available. We just need to be aware of the concerns in advance. The concrete itself takes about 28 days to reach its full strength. So we discourage driving on it until that period has elapsed, though usually after about a week, it isn't a big deal, but that's just to play it safe. Now, the slide here says you shouldn't walk on the sidewalks for 28 days, but the walks are generally fine to be walked on after the string line or the formworks have been removed. Pretty much as long as the area you're planning to walk on isn't obviously marked off by barricades or some other safety tape or something, you should be fine. Next slide, please. So working around trees. So as I've kind of touched upon before, the neighborhood renewal team will work very closely with the forestry team to assess potential adverse impacts to trees in the neighborhood. Again, the intent is to work around the trees without causing any significant damage to them. Affected property owners will be notified of trimming and will meet with the homeowners who perhaps have more significant effects as required. And I will say that removal of any trees is a last resort. It is required in the city of Edmonton to offset the value of any lost mature trees is it with an equal value of new landscaping, and mature trees are very valuable in the city of Edmonton. So there is a financial incentive to avoid messing around with them. So next slide, please, Jen. All right, connector walkways, or again, the private sidewalk between your front door and the city sidewalk. So once the new city sidewalk is installed, the new driveways and connector sidewalks will be poured. If your new private walk is expected to be steeper than what the city's standards allow, we'll give you the option to have a step installed instead. Now, of course, we won't put any steps on your driveway. We make that work. And once again, we will match materials between your existing driveway or private walk and your new construction. So again, if you have paver stones, generally we just salvage the existing stones, pile them up nearby, probably just on the part of your driveway we don't touch, and we'll put them back in when we're done. There's, that's the process. So next slide, please, Jen. Done that one. So getting back to landscaping, or rehashing it. So the existing landscaping behind the sidewalks will be disturbed to facilitate construction. We have to temporarily dig up that area. I say there's sort of the up to 2 meters or 6 feet, though you saw from the other photo, it's maybe only a foot or two in 90% of cases. And pretty much it's just, we need to get everything that's in that space out of the way in advance of construction. And if there are special things that can't be moved, you can get in touch with us and we can make special arrangements. Now, landscape restoration can often take a little bit longer to happen because the landscaping contractor, like the sprinkler guys, want to work as efficiently as possible. So they are going to want multiple blocks to be ready for them before they come out to do it. The other part of it is if there's a lot of construction traffic kind of happening in an area at once, it can basically cause a delay to the landscaping because they're kind of the last ones to do their thing. So in many cases, the landscaping doesn't get repaired until after the road is paved. So there may be a slice out of the front of your yard for a good chunk of the summer. And that's, I guess, just kind of the way the workflow goes. But they will be back to fix it. They do come in and they did an excellent job last year in Grandview Heights. So that's landscaping in a nutshell. Next slide, please, Jen. So I guess getting to the main event, road reclamation and paving, that's the slide title for our friends on the phone. So much of Malmo Plains has been identified for a process called full depth reclamation, where the existing pavement and gravel structure is pulverized, broken into little pieces, and treated with cement powder and asphalt oil to become the new road base. And this base is allowed to cure, and the new asphalt pavement is paved on top of it, forming the new roadway. Now, pulverizing and grading takes a couple days to complete, and the road will usually be closed for this process. If the barricades are removed, you are welcome to drive on the unpaved base. But I would ask you to not do so if for some reason your vehicle is really muddy and it's going to be dropping material on the roadway, because then our contractor has to come back and clean that up. The other note of caution is if you have a smaller vehicle like a Honda Civic or something with pretty low ground clearance, I just advise caution if you're driving across the curb and sidewalk, say to and from an alley or a front driveway, because there can often be, say, 100 millimeter or a 4-inch drop there. The contractor usually constructs little ramps and stuff there, but it's just a caution. There can be a sharp drop off if you're not expecting it. If the road is closed, please do not move or drive around barricades to access an area. If you really need access to the front of your property for some reason while the road is closed, you can speak to the contractor or you can speak to me and we can make the necessary arrangements. And then just another thing that's happening in Malmo is other parts of Malmo will be a more traditional road reconstruction, where we come in, we dig out the old asphalt, dig out the old gravel, put in new gravel, put in new asphalt, and kind of build the road the regular way. But once again, before any of this happens, the contractor will deliver notices to the immediately adjacent properties so that you know when the road closures are coming. And the intent is to ensure that there is always a different way out. You might have to do some crazy detouring through Malmo, but we're not intending to trap you in your house for 3 weeks at a time or something like that. But with paving, the roads are usually, the day they're paved, they usually open that evening, and that means the landscaping is not quite done, but the road is paved. You can drive on it, and there'll be no more dust or carrying on in front of your house, at least for this round of neighborhood renewal. Now, I will say that generally the new road construction doesn't happen until sometime after the sidewalk is done, because we want most of the sidewalks to be complete by the time we're coming in and rebuilding the roads. So most areas are going to be in a state where there'll be new sidewalks on the road with still the old pavement remaining, and the edge might be a little rough if you're parking, but the road remains passable, and the road remains open during the in-between period. So it is open. It's just a bit. It's a funny kind of thing for a time. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, quality assurance and testing. So just as FYI, so we test the concrete, asphalt, and gravel-based materials as they are installed. Anything that isn't compliant with City of Edmonton standards is removed and replaced for free. And what happens once everything is done is the new roadways are subject to a 2-year warranty. So at the end of each year of construction, members of the project team and the contractor team will walk through the whole neighborhood and identify any repairs to be made. So if there's major cracking or problems with asphalt, et cetera, et cetera. And if the things need to be replaced now, the contractor makes the fixes. And at the end of the 2-year warranty period, we do the exact same thing again, go through, look and see how things have performed, maybe do replacements of spots that aren't holding up. Obviously, the intent is to have as minimal warranty work as possible, and that's to the city and to the contractor's benefit, and just to make sure that the materials and everything are of the quality that the city expects. Now, this contract is structured as a long-term contract where our contractor, which is Lafarge, works on several neighborhoods over multiple years. In 2021, they're going to be in Malmo Plains, and they'll also be working nearby in Grandview Heights. Next slide, please. And this last slide is called construction phases for our friends on the phone, because this is a more important one, you could say. This is a map showing the areas for construction timing. Green areas are planned for 2021, while blue areas are planned for 2022. So if you're in the blue, I guess you're off the hook for a year, and we'll see you next year, though they'll be still have to deal with the construction traffic. But now, how the contract is structured is that the contractor gets to pick where they start. The city doesn't specify that, kind of to not tell them how to do their job, quote unquote. But how it generally works is you can kind of think of it like you're painting the floor or the wall or something. You want to start in the corners and work your way into the middle. So if you're in the green and you're to one of the corners, you're probably going to be close to being up first for having construction, at least the new sidewalks being started in front of your house. And if I was a betting man, though this is not confirmed, I would guess they would be starting more towards the west side of the neighborhood. But that will be communicated via notices once we've had more meetings with the contractor to confirm this. So yeah, so this is a slide that it'll be posted online and stuff to refer to later if you have more questions about it. But next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so finally, here is my contact information. Now, I'll say that there are about 600 homeowners in Malmo, plus the people of Grandview Heights. So if you all call me at once, it's going to take me a while to get back to you. So I'd ask that you bear with me through this process. The team does look forward to working with and renewing your neighborhood, working with you guys over the next 2 years. So next slide, please, Jen. And with that, I will kind of hand things back over to our host here, and we'll take some questions on the construction process. I'll have a drink of water, and we'll be back to talk about local improvements in a little bit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joshua. So that does wrap up the construction presentation portion of this session. So now I'm going to ask our panelists to join me back on screen. I'll give them a moment to come back on. And we'll get to the start of the questions. So the first question that we have today, what are the start and end dates for construction, and what part of Malmo Plains will be constructed first?
Okay, well, I'll lead with that. I kind of just got into that a bit in the presentation here, but what'll happen is we'll probably see some street lighting work get underway potentially in April into early May. surface work. They might see some sidewalks kind of happening in early May. It's usually the asphalt batch plants and the surface contractors really get going around May long, and kind of from May long through until the snow flies will be when we're doing various things out in Malmo. Again, it won't be in front of a specific house at all times. They'll be all over the neighborhood all summer, and there'll be plenty of communications going out to the residents who are affected in the immediate area. Anything to add to that, Jason?
Just the overall timelines. The contract is set to begin, like Josh said, first week of May, and it will be done in the middle of October of 2021 for the first portion and 2022 for the second.
Good point. Yeah, it's a 2-year program, so we'll be out there for the next 2 summers continuously.
Great. So we've got our next question. How far from existing sidewalks will my yard be dug up to install the new wider sidewalk, and how much encroachment will be required for transition? And then the second part of that question is, how will the neighborhood renewal impact the encroachment agreement for my stone planters on Malmo Plains?
I can maybe speak to the widening aspect of the walks, and then maybe hand
Sure.
off the encroachment stuff to Jason or to Joshua.
Sure.
Majority of the sidewalks within Malmo Plains, will be trying to match what's existing in terms of the back of walk, plus or minus about 4 inches or 100 millimeters. If you live along 116th Street, 115th Street, Malmo Road, or 49th Ave, and in and around the school, you could expect larger changes of up to a foot or more. That would be coordinated with you during construction when we mark out the removal limits as well. You'd see that. I'll maybe pass off the encroachment details maybe to Jason or Josh.
Yeah, you take that one, Jason, or you got?
Sure. Why don't I feel for your vocal cords here,
Well,
so why don't you take them?
thanks.
So, in a general sense, general rule of thumb, I'll speak to this question in a broader sense in terms of how far we go back onto private property, because that's something that everybody's always interested in. So the kind of the removal limits that a contractor needs to rebuild the sidewalk is about a foot. That's what they need to build a sidewalk. So from that edge of that sidewalk, they need about a foot to build. Now we go back as far as we need to in order to maintain a nice positive drainage slope away from everyone's home. So we don't ever send water back towards people's houses. We want to make sure that water continues to flow away from your house, across the lawn, out over the sidewalk, and to the road. And the elevation of that sidewalk can change substantially. It typically never goes down. It usually comes up too. So basically that elevation of that new sidewalk sets how far we need to go back onto the lawn in order to build that and to maintain positive drainage away from the property. In terms of encroachments, planters encroaching onto the sidewalk, so the hard line for city work is we keep that road right of way for our use. Like the property line actually ends usually 3 feet kind of behind that sidewalk. A lot of people don't know that, but that property is the city's to do with as it pleases. We keep that for a reason. The reason is neighborhood renewals, when we need to come along and do this kind of thing. It happens every 40 to 50 years. So in the meantime, between neighborhood renewals, people build in those, they plant things in those, and it's understandable that you kind of treat it as part of your property. So when you come into something like, say, for example, planters, we can usually work around them. They're not supposed to be there, but we're not there to kind of tear out people's efforts to beautify their property and city property. So I'm not that worried about things like planters. We can usually work around things like that. You'll want to talk to Josh if you do have anything on city property that you're not planning on removing yourself, because like I said, strictly by the letter of the law, if it's on city property, you need to remove it for Josh to do his work. But you can usually find a way to work around most things. If you're really, really concerned about it though, we do recommend you remove it yourself. Okay, that's it for me.
Great. Josh, anything to add?
Nope, I think Jason's got that one covered. I'll let that one stand. That's
I think so
excellent.
too. Great. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question, if the sprinkler system is near to the city sidewalk, does the property owner have to remove it in order to allow the sidewalk replacement work?
Okay, yeah, I can speak to that. Kind of, touched on that a bit in the presentation. If it's like right up against the back of the walk, we will take it out of service and we'll pull some of the lines out and pull some of the heads and try to preserve all that. And then our contractor will come back after it's constructed to repair it and put it back into working order, lining up with the new back of the sidewalk if it's in a slightly different spot. So there's no onus on the homeowner there to do anything besides we just ask that if you have them on a timer or something that you just don't use those lines, because it's no fun when the timer goes off and it's just a pipe sticking out of the ground and it proceeds to dump a bunch of water into the roadway, which can make it more difficult to do the construction work. So besides just if we disturb certain sprinkler lines, we just ask that you obviously don't use them until the repair work is completed.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Where does the 6 feet get measured from to help us relocate our plants in the front of our yards? Is it from the side of the curb or the lawn side of the sidewalk?
That's a good question. I'll speak to that. Yeah, I know I said 6 feet, but Jason just pointed out it is probably less. It's probably more like 2. I just say 6 to as my play it safe, but it's less. And it would be measured from your lawn side, from the part of the sidewalk that's closest to your house, kind of thing, or closest to your property. But it doesn't have to be 6 feet. You don't have to go and pull out every individual thing. Again, 2 feet is probably enough. But if you have some small shrub that's very valuable to you or something, and it can be easily relocated, and it's 4 feet away, maybe you want to move that just to play it safe. But as kind of Jason just chatted on in the encroachment discussion, it's probably closer to 2 feet. So you don't have to stress out about that. If there's something that's in the way of what we need to do and we haven't chatted about it, we will reach out to you to discuss it, kind of thing. So I know we're here say get the stuff out of the way, but it's not right now critically, kind of thing. But I'll let, if Jason has anything to add to that, go ahead.
Just want to just to like basically beef up what you said, which is we're not there to, cause undue stress. Neighborhood
Nope.
renewal is stressful enough as it is. If there's something that's in the way of the work, you're definitely going to get contacted before. The contractor's not going to come along and rip and tear without.
Yeah, I'm not there. I'm not going to show up with a wrecking ball and just bulldoze everything that's in the way. Absolutely not. So if you have a question about something or whatever, you can reach out. We can chat about stuff that's close to the sidewalk, and you can send me a picture or whatever, and we can determine it's like, yeah, it's okay, we can work around it, or yeah, we need to move that, or whatever the case requires. So yeah, we're not here to just say, get out of the way, bulldoze everything. Absolutely not.
Great. So the next question, will there be any improvements to the back alleys? Are alleys going to be repaired as part of this project? If not, when might that happen?
Oh, this is another good question. So I'll take the first part of this, and Jason will probably add to it as well. But so alley renewals are technically not a part of the Malmo neighborhood renewals or the general neighborhood renewal program. There is a separate alley renewal program that is newer, that sometimes follows in neighborhoods some years after. Right now, there's no projected timeline for that to come into Malmo. Now, that being said, because we are making improvements to the shared use path up against White Mud Drive there, that does include some reconstruction of some of the alleys in Malmo, but that is a bonus, not a given. And there will be new alley lighting going in across all of Malmo, but a lot of the internal or the alleys in Malmo that don't have a shared use path adjacent to them will not be renewed as part of this process. And it would still be, if repairs need to be done, that would still be done through 311, et cetera. It is not on our contractor to take care of that side of things. So I'll defer to Jason if he has anything to add.
Yeah, so the short answer is no. Alleys are not part of the program, but will expand a little bit on why. Alleys traditionally are considered a local improvement, and local improvements are paid by the owners who uh, get the most benefit out of them. So basically, everyone living along the alley would pay for that alley in a special tax. When there's a local improvement happening on the sidewalks already, and sometimes the streetlights, it's just considered to be too much of a hit all at once to include the alleys as part of a neighborhood renewal. That's historically. Now, alley alley alleys are in bad shape in the city, and councils recognize that. So they have started this other multi-million dollar kind of alley renewal program. Started last year. It's ramping up this year and continuing probably for decades. But the alleys that are not done as part of neighborhood renewal, they will be done kind of as the neighborhood renewals progress. The alley program kind of follows along behind. And the good thing about that is that council has decided to not treat that as a local improvement. So that just comes out of the general taxes rather than a special tax when they do come to do them. In terms of a specific time for Malmo's alleys, that I couldn't say. It hasn't been scheduled yet.
Wonderful.
But
Thank
still,
you.
if homeowners would like to initiate local improvement alley reconstruction, they can do that, and they can contact local improvement and initiate local improvement alley renewal. But it will be paid 100% by homeowners.
Great. That's wonderful. Thanks for pointing that out. So we'll move on to the next question. How do you ensure access to homes and garages? And will the team ensure that at least one end of the alley remains open during construction?
Yeah, I can, again, I'll take part of that one. Now, we work with the contractor here to, they basically have to plan their work as to not trap anybody in their property. If there's some special occurrences or something, they pretty much have to negotiate that directly with each homeowner. And as I kind of touched on in the construction presentation, like we will be in Malmo all summer, but we won't be in front of a particular area, you know, for very long. And quite often, the majority of the roads will remain open like most of the time. There'll just be new walks, so maybe one side of the road is affected at a time. And generally what happens if we're closing off a chunk of road, we try to structure it such that most people can park, either use the alley. The alleys are really leaned on as the alternate access. So I guess to the second part of that question, the both ends of most alleys should remain open, but I guess I can't promise it, or it's however it works with the contractor's workflow. But generally we try to make sure there's somewhere nearby that you can park that isn't like say more than a block away kind of thing, or less. Generally it depends on how the contractor wants to structure their workflow, but it is in their best interest to keep you guys as happy as possible throughout construction. So there are efforts made to accommodate and make sure, even if you have to take a bit of a long detour route to get into your house, you can still park quite close to it. If there are, I know there's some people who don't necessarily have alley access and are running onto like a side lot, a flankage, and they, may lose access to their driveway for a time. And there's perhaps discussions to be had with them individually about what can be done, but there will be some interruptions to access to say the front of your house off and on throughout construction, depending on which year of construction your property falls in. So anyone else wants to add to that?
Sure.
Hearing none, I guess we're good.
Oh, can you hear me? I just want to make a clear distinction. Can you hear me?
I lost connection for a second there. Sorry.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
I just want to make a clear distinction between driveways in the front of the house and driveways that feed off the back alley. So to answer the person's question, alley access will be maintained from one end or the other. If there's two ways into an alley, one will always be open. It's contractual. It's a contractual obligation of the contractor to keep one alley access open. For driveways that feed off of the street in front, there will be a period of time when that driveway is not available, obviously, until we develop a construction method that allows us to build underneath people's tires in real time and space. That has to be the case. So and the time frame for that is typically 3 to 6 weeks that you'll be out of your driveway if you have a front access driveway.
Great. So let's move on to the next question. How will this affect school buses? So Josh, I'll let you start.
Yeah, so hopefully, sorry about the connection problem there. That was weird.
That's okay.
Yeah, the school buses. So there's kind of two sides to this. So for the Malmo school, the requirements for the contractor is that generally they have to accommodate that school at all times, and they will complete their work during the summer months only. Now, the other kind of side of that question is if there's school buses coming through the neighborhood to pick up students to go to schools in other neighborhoods, across in the city. Now, generally, we've been in touch with the school board, perhaps with the bus companies, but what'll happen is just they'll have to follow the same detours that everybody else does in the neighborhood. And we've had an inquiry from, say, another homeowner's like, hey, we have like some special needs or whatever. So if there's some reason that you can't get on the bus, like say half a block away or something, we can accommodate that. You just have to get in touch with us and let us know. I know examples we've been able to install, like wheelchair ramps and stuff across the excavation. There are, plenty of accommodations we can do for, special needs. And, and this would go for, say, a DATS bus as well. If you're concerned about things like that, it's just, yeah, if you have a special accommodation there, please reach out, and we just need to know about it so we can make sure our contractor knows, and they will accommodate that to the maximum of their ability, kind of thing.
Perfect. Let's move on to the next question. The question number 9, I would like to know why a multi-use bike lane is needed when most people use that space for dog walking. Tony, do you want to get started on this question?
Yeah, you bet. I'm, I guess, speaking to, my understanding of the question being that we're speaking about the connection north of 51st Avenue on 115th Street. So completing that shared use path through that section in Lenderum, as well as, I guess, south of that on 115th Street, through Malmo Plains. What it does is it completes the bike connection that's kind of identified in the city's bike network from essentially the White Mud Bridge connection. I think Josh actually touched upon it in his presentation, all the way to 60th Avenue, basically at the north end of Lenderum. And so what this does is it provides a separated bike facility or path through this section. And the fact that it is a shared use path, it still allows all users, including the people that are walking their dogs, to use this space. So even though the space right now north of 51st Avenue is used for people walking their dogs, once this path is built, what it does is it opens up the opportunity for people on bikes to be off the road in this separate facility, and also allows the flexibility of use for other modes, including walking, strolling, etc., kind of formalized through that section. So hopefully I'm understanding the question correctly.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Let's move on to the next question. How long would a sidewalk be closed? How long do they take to build? I'm also wondering about postal service access. Is this an issue at all?
Well, generally, as long as the weather cooperates, the sidewalk construction can go relatively quick. Like, maybe Jason can chime in, but it can be as fast as a week. It might take 2 weeks. It sort of depends on the amount of concrete they're doing at a time. If they're doing a big block, small block, kind of things like that. But generally, it all happens pretty fast. And I don't like, I know the delivery people sometimes, if you're ordering like new couches from the brick or something, it might be a bit more difficult to get the delivery vehicle in there. But generally, the guys kind of work around the detours. Sometimes the contractor, if it's safe to do so, will let them drive in on the base. It's sort of a case by case thing. I don't recall there being any issues with mail delivery in Grandview Heights last year, but that's, I mean, a good question, and let's kind of keep that in mind. But I'll defer to Jason here if you got anything to add to that from your experience.
Yeah, I will, just because I want to make sure expectations are about right for what's coming for people. You can expect to see construction on your street for about anywhere between 6 and 12 weeks. That's not necessarily in front of your house, but on your street,
Good
because
point.
they need to do the curb and gutters on one side of the road, the sidewalks on that side of the road, all of the tie-ins on that side of the road up to your house and driveways. Then they need to do exactly the same thing on the other side of the road. It's typically about 6 weeks per side. And then following that, of course, is the road itself. That's actually one of the fastest processes, actually. That takes usually a week. But in terms of pedestrian mobility around while that's going on, there is a reason why we only work on one side of the street at a time. You'll always have one side or the other to walk on. So they'll, while they're working on one side of the street, the sidewalk is open on the other. When they flip, that means that the sidewalk they were working on is complete and ready for use. So there's always somewhere to walk. And then what was the second part of that question? Oh, Canada Post.
Yeah, delivery access.
That's a really good question, because I've been involved in 10 neighborhood renewals, and some of them have gone absolutely issue free with Canada Post, and others it's been a real challenge. It often has a lot to do with the character of the postie. If they feel it's unsafe, they will not deliver. And if they don't deliver, what they'll do is they'll drop a card in your mailbox and tell you where your mail is being held for pickup. So it's usually the nearest postal depot. So that's typically how that works. But it really does come down to a personal call of the postie on your block. If he feels that it is his mission in life to deliver through rain, snow, sleet, hail, and neighborhood renewal, then you'll get your mail. And if he doesn't, then he will give you a postcard that says pick it up at the depot.
Perfect. Okay, we're running low on time, so we're going to just do one more question here on construction. Then we'll move into the local improvement. And if we have time at the end, we'll get to as many questions as we can, bringing back some of these construction questions. So the last question for right now, we have 2 mature spruce trees in our front yard, which we were thinking of removing before this renewal. You stated that the city prefers to retain these mature trees. Is this something we should reconsider before this process begins? Should we talk to someone on the project team prior to removing them?
Okay, well, this is a good question. I guess if the trees are on private property, you are free to do with them as you see fit. Depending on where they are, if they're super close to the roadway or the sidewalk or something, you could get in touch with us and we could discuss the effect they might have. If they're kind of far away from the road or aren't going to have an effect on what we're planning to do in the neighborhood renewal side of things, then maybe there's less of an impact from our end. I would just suggest, depending on, I guess, your timing to remove these trees, and if you're getting a construction notice or something, you just, there may be temporary interruptions to the access to the front of your house while we're renewing, and the tree services guys might not be able to get in there. So I guess you're welcome to reach out to us and let us know what your plan is there, and we can evaluate if there's a benefit or a reason. Okay, if you're going to remove these, maybe it makes some part of the renewal process easier, or maybe they're independent and it doesn't have an effect. So by all means, reach out and we can discuss that further.
Fantastic. So as I mentioned, we will move on to the local improvement process section of the presentation now. So if everyone would like to turn their cameras back off,
I want to keep mine on.
You can keep yours on, Joshua. I'm
Okay.
going to queue up the presentation, and then we can get started.
We'll get back into, you get to continue listening to me yammer on about local improvements, everyone's favorite topic.
Sounds good. And we'll be back in a couple minutes to answer a few more questions.
Thanks, Jen. All right, so for our friends on the phone, this slide title is Local Improvements. It has like a timeline on it where the 30-day petition period has a circle around it on the green City of Edmonton background. Sorry, I don't know the number. But yes, local improvements. We're right in the middle of that process. We are in the 30-day petition period. So the notices have gone out, the bylaw's been prepared. We'll see what the results of this petition period are, and that would go through whatever occurs for voted on by City Council. Construction occurs, and after construction is done, we complete the local improvements tax levy. Next slide, please. So local improvements. So individual property owners are responsible for some costs for improvements considered to be of a greater benefit to the individual property versus the city or the neighborhood as a whole. The authority to levy these charges on your property derives from the Provincial Municipal Government Act, or MGA for short. And for Malmo Plains, the cost shareable items are twofold. So one is the sidewalk construction, which is split 50-50 between the city and the individual property owner. The second local improvement item, and in this go around, are the decorative streetlight installation, where the additional cost beyond, say, the regular silver galvanized pole like you might see out on 51st Ave or 111th Street, that additional cost for the black poles is what is levied on property owners. So with LI assessments, there are two payment options: lump sum, where you pay it all up front, or you have the option to amortize the cost over a period of 20 years. This charge is added to your property taxes, and the balance or the loan stays with the property. So if you sell your home, the home next owner would assume responsibility for that remaining amount. Next slide, please. So, okay, this is probably the densest slide of the presentation here. So I guess you can get out your pen and paper. There is no test, but this we'll be on this one for a while. So we'll get through it here together. So as I said, owners are responsible for 50% of the sidewalk reconstruction based on their lot length assessment. And this gets a bit more complicated if you're on a corner lot or a pie lot, and we'll get into that shortly. But just to start off, the 2021 rate for sidewalks is about $194 per meter of assessed length, or about $12.60 per meter per year for 20 years. This works out to about a 3% annualized interest rate if you choose to finance your sidewalk local improvement charges. Now, for example, if you have a regular rectangular 50-foot lot with sidewalk only at the front of your property, like say in that photo, if you're the neighbor to the west of the guy with the blue car in his driveway, you're just that lot with only the sidewalk on the front, your frontage cost would be about $2,960 if you pay the lump sum, or your yearly cost is about $192 per year for 20 years. Now, if you have a corner lot, say you own the house with the blue car in the driveway, you are assessed the frontage length, which is the short dimension of the lot, plus 15% of the side or the flankage or the long length. Those are all the same thing. Now, if you have a lot like the last example, so say you have a 50-foot frontage and a 75-foot length on your flankage. So your lot is almost the same as that first example, except now you're on the flankage. You're that house with the blue car. So you would pay the $2,960 that your neighbor pays, plus an additional charge of about $665 for a total lump sum assessment of about $3,625. So by that same math, your yearly payment for the corner lot would be about $235 a year for 20 years. Now, note that it doesn't actually matter if your front door faces the short or long side of your property. The calculation is based on the long and short dimensions of your property only. So the city is not charging you more if the front of your house, say like the guy with the red car in his driveway across the street from his blue neighbor, if their lots are the same dimensions, they pay the same corner lot local improvements assessment on the sidewalks. It doesn't matter which way the house faces. Now, condo units, which are a little bit less relevant for Malmo Plains, have their total charges divided by the total number of units in the building, including parking and storage spaces if they happen to have tax roll accounts. So this means, pardon me, that the amounts assessed to individual condo owners can vary widely. So now, pie lots get a bit more complicated again, so you might need your ruler and your protractor for this part. But I'll just read straight off the slide and we'll go from there. So a pie or odd-shaped lot frontage is determined by adding the front and rear lot dimensions and dividing the total in half. In other words, an average. The rear dimension of a pie-shaped lot is scaled at the corner of the shortest side and is projected at a right angle to the longest side. So that last sentence is really just a long-winded description of that black dotted line that has the arrow saying rear dimension scaled. Effectively, a pie lot uses an adjusted rear length and the front length, and that is averaged out, and that is used to calculate the local improvements value. So different pie lots, like the assessments on a pie lot can vary quite widely. I don't have like an example value here. Now, this is not on the slide, but the local improvement assessment value for the additional cost for the decorative streetlights is about $13 per meter of frontage, meaning that the non-corner lot, so the neighbor to the blue car lot guy, would pay a total of about $197, and that's the lump sum, that's one-time payment. And the corner lot, the blue car guy, would pay about $295 for the lump sum. I didn't do the amortization thing because the costs, as you see, are quite a bit lower than they are for the sidewalk costs. Now, with respect to these costs, they are not assessed until the year after construction in front of each property is completed. So about half of Malmo would see the charges applied next year, i.e. in 2022, while the other half, the people who see construction in 2022, don't have these charges applied until 2023. So you will receive, or you have received, separate assessment letters for the sidewalks and the streetlights. And you might receive two, if you're on a corner lot, you might receive two for the sidewalks. So it's possible some properties have received up to 3 letters from the city to cover the sidewalks and decorative streetlights local improvements. So that's it for this slide, finally. Next one, please, Jen. Cool. Okay, so local improvements. So we usually try to get these notices out about 4 to 6 months before construction. We're about 4 months or so out from really getting started at this point in time. So now, you are able to petition against the assessed local improvement cost within the 30-day period by completing the sworn affidavit process with the city's local improvements group. So a valid petition must include witness signatures of all title owners and must swear an affidavit before Commissioner of Oaths, which I guess Ludmilla is our local improvements representative on this call and can provide more information on that front. Now, the petition period for Malmo Plains ends on February 20th of 2021. And Malmo has been divided into several local improvements project areas. So Jen, you can go to the next slide for me that has the map. And how it works is that more than 50% of the property owners within a project area must petition against the walk improvements to halt sidewalk reconstruction within that specific local improvement area. So you see there's like 10 through 15 here, the different project areas. Those are the groups of local improvement areas, or the areas that more than 50% of the owners within a given colored blob must petition against the sidewalks to halt sidewalk reconstruction within that area, your colored area only. All project areas are considered individually, and any new sidewalks that are being added to Malmo in areas where sidewalks do not currently exist are not cost shared with property owners and are not affected by this process. Now, with respect to the decorative street lights, that local improvements area covers the entire neighborhood. So these colored areas shown on this slide are not representative of that. Half of all owners in Malmo would need to petition against that to halt that process. And as another clarification, you are free to petition against just the sidewalks, just the street lights, or both if you're so inclined. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so if a local improvement project area's residents successfully petition against the sidewalk replacement process, the city will leave the sidewalks as is, and they will continue to be maintained at the city's cost. The roadway against the old walks will be repaired and renewed, but my opinion is that the finished product will not be as good as in the areas where we're able to do full replacements of the curbs and walks, because we're able to make improvements to drainage patterns and other things like that. If the decorative street light is additional, or the LI is petitioned against, the lights would simply revert back to the traditional silver galvanized kind of standard style you would see across the city. Next slide, please, Jen. But then, so if there are not enough petitions against, to say the local improvement petition fails, and that means we get to proceed with building new sidewalks or putting in the black streetlights across the neighborhood, and then sort of removing the concrete, all those other things I just touched upon in the construction presentation happen, and that again, in my opinion, produces a superior product than if you're just building the roads up against the existing walks that may be in good shape or may not be. Next slide, please, Jen. So yes, just touch back on street lights. So here again is just another image of the street light and the arm. So the black pole with what's called the heritage style arm, that is was the expression of interest, was successful for Malmo. So these are the lights that will be installed if the local improvements petition fails. I know it's a mouthful. The alleys will get new LED lighting, similar to kind of what exists near the Southgate LRT access if you've been through there. So it's not as fancy, but it's completely functional. Another thing not covered here is the decorative sign blades. So we're in the process of working with our sign team to get new design mock-ups, and they'll be provided to the Malmo Plains Community League. I believe what they've done previously is shared them on the Facebook page, but I don't want to, they're handling that process. I don't want to quote them or commit them to anything, but they will, when we get the new kind of special design for those street blades, they'll be shared. There's no additional cost to do custom street blades over and above replacing the existing ones. But with that, maybe I'll pass things back to Jen here, and we could take some questions about the local improvements process. I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk, and I need a drink of water. So thanks again for listening. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm just joking. No.
Thank you, Joshua. So I'm just going to invite our panelists to join us back on screen. And we will get started with the local improvement process questions. So the first question we have about local improvement is, must 100% of residents want new sidewalks for the replacement to occur?
Maybe Ludmila take that, but I say the short answer is no,
Yeah.
but go ahead, Ludmila.
To support local improvement, city requires 50 plus 1% of the neighborhood.
And is that both for sidewalks and the decorative street lights?
Decorative street lights is 100% paid by homeowners, and we need 50 plus 1% as well to support local improvement decorative street.
Yeah, so like a simple majority is enough in support effectively.
Okay. And for the sidewalks, that goes back to that image that you shared earlier, Josh, with the map on it.
Yes, and yeah, that's the sidewalks, those colored areas, and they'll be available online, or the people with printouts will have that showing these are the properties that are on your team or will be are affected by the petition process, as it were.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the next question. Are there alternatives and cheaper options available for sidewalk renewal?
City provides two options for homeowners. One option is full cost. You pay it once after the construction will be done. That means that if construction starts in 2021, you will start to pay local improvement tax next year. And the second option, it's amortized payment. So what does that mean? That you will split your payments over 20 years, but it will be interest applied on your local improvement tax. The interest rate for 2021 is 2% and 263%. So, for example, the typical lot of 15 meters will cost about $3,000. And if you decided to split it for over 20 years, your yearly payment will be about $200, including interest.
And maybe to add slightly to that, and maybe there's I interpreted the question another way, is like, are there like construction justifications for like cheaper options to sidewalk renewal? And maybe to approach that version of the question, I'd say like, yeah, if you're just doing crack repairs and things like that, sort of some of the general city repairs that they do in sidewalks all over the city. Just the trick with neighborhood renewals is that we are trying to make adjustments to like some minor tweaks and stuff to drainage patterns and grading in Malmo, and that effectively requires sometimes changing the height of the sidewalk or the curb or both to accommodate sort of the new engineering philosophy or intentions. And the best way to adjust the heights of sidewalk and curb is to replace the sidewalk and curb. So again, you get the most kind of the best performance from something like that. And it really is the most, having all the sidewalks replaced at once allows the city to kind of do it cost effectively in terms of, getting volume discounts and things like that. And knowing that everything's been replaced at the same time makes it easier to manage the life cycle of things. So that's kind of why it's easier to just, tear everything out and redo it, as opposed to trying to keep patching things over and over again.
Great. I think we covered both angles of that question. Hopefully the homeowner agrees with us. The next question, why is the replacement of damaged sidewalks, as there are many in the neighborhood, not at city cost? Why must the property owner pay for this cost?
Okay, I think I touched on that in the presentation, is that the local improvements only apply to things that are of more benefit to an individual property versus the neighborhood or city as a whole. And in this case, it's only the sidewalks are affected here. So the city is asking you to pay for 50% of the sidewalk in front of your property, while the other half is covered by the city's like neighborhood renewal funding as a whole. Plus all of the roads and stuff aren't even part of the local improvements process. That happens no matter what and is covered not within the local improvements process kind of thing. So it's just the pieces that are deemed to be of the most benefit to the individual property. And in this case, that is the sidewalk and the small cost to upgrade the streetlights to the black pole style with the nicer arm design.
Okay, fantastic. The next question we have: some community homeowners have expressed concerns about the high cost of sidewalks in these challenging times of COVID. What options do homeowners have available from the City of Edmonton to assist income-challenged residents with the cost of sidewalk renewal? For example, homeowner grant program or SHARP grant is another option for seniors. So do we have someone on the team who would like to take this question?
Sorry,
There is a seniors property tax deferral program through the government of Alberta that can be explored by the property owner as well. Yeah, Jason?
So, I mean, it's a great question and very valid in the present COVID era. There is a program that Ludo is talking about, and I think the best way to kind of get more details on that would be to contact Luda outside of this presentation. There's a number of federal kind of COVID related programs on the go right now. I don't know all the details of those. They're not specific to neighborhood renewal, obviously, but they're out there, and you could investigate those. My recommendation is, if you're tight, I would lean towards the amortizing the payment option rather than paying it all kind of as a lump sum. It does reduce it down substantially to a kind of a more manageable $200 a year kind of thing, rather than a one-time expensive $3,000 at once. So, but in terms of assistance, there's not a lot of targeted to neighborhood renewal things, because it's such a unique construction activity that happens once every 40 to 50 years. So yeah, it's not a great answer, but that's kind of the answer that we have.
Okay, wonderful. And to find contact information, it is available on edmonton.ca/local improvement, or you can go through edmonton.ca/building Malmo Plains to find contact information. So the next question we have is, if the petition against the renewal is successful, when will Malmo Plains be considered for neighborhood renewal again?
Okay, I'll start off on this one, and Jason might hop in. I guess I'll just clarify again. The petition only applies to the sidewalks, so the roads and the shared use path stuff and everything that's not, I guess, sidewalks and the decorative poles will happen no matter what. It's just, yeah, if there's a bunch of petition against the new walks and we have to work around the existing walks, the lifespan of the new roads will probably be reduced. We don't get quite as good of a finished product because ISL has less to work with effectively in correcting, drainage patterns and stuff. And maybe there are some areas, like I've seen some complaints about the slope of the sidewalks in front of the Malmo school, and that would be something we want to fix as part of this. We will still be putting in new sidewalks in areas that aren't subject to local improvements, such as near the school and things like that, where they're not assessed to property owners. But beyond that, as Jason sort of touched upon, the neighborhood renewal is like a once every 40 to 50 years thing, and you can expect it'll be that long again before anything happens in Malmo again. So that's again, I know it's a big cost, but it's best if we can renew everything now and get it done. Then we'll get the best lifespan out of this new infrastructure. And I guess I'll defer to Jason if he has anything to add.
Not really. No, just the short answer is 40 to 50 years before we're back again.
So a while. So let's move on to the next question. How do I express my interest on the payment method? Also, how do I have to pay?
After construction is done, homeowners will receive a local improvement tax assessment. And at that time, they will contact tax department and express their interest, how they want to pay, yearly or lump sum.
Okay. It looks like we've got just one more question for local improvement, and then we probably could get back to the questions regarding construction. So the last local improvement question we've got, I was wondering why the sidewalk in front of Malmo School is very sloped towards the road. Is this a mistake or is it part of the new drainage patterns?
Yeah, I guess I saw that pop up in the chat, was sort of touching on that in the last question there, is that we haven't replaced that yet and would like to try and correct some of that and reduce some of these cross slopes on the walks, across the entire neighborhood where appropriate. Like Nick and Tony are working quite hard on getting this design finalized to identify these spots where we can try and make some spots where this walk is shifted or maybe was tied into things back in the day for whatever reason, and we're out here trying to renew and make reasonable marginal improvements to things. So that I think Nick, we've had a discussion about that in meetings about that one particular spot. So it's on our list, and we're trying to improve things here. And maybe you got a comment, Nick, or anything. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that we're definitely trying to fix scenarios like that in the neighborhood right now. That's about twice as steep compared to the standard that we're aiming for now going back into the neighborhood. I just wanted to touch on another question here we got in the chat from Matthew in regards to they have a colored concrete walk leading up to their house that cannot be matched. Who will we contact to make sure it's not removed? I'm going to speak to what I think how this process goes, and maybe Jason and Josh can chime in later. My rule of thumb when we're going in and doing the grade design is these special features, these decorative aspects, I'm typically trying to match them. I'm typically trying to make the road work with what you have. There's going to be scenarios where that doesn't always work. And we have tricks in our back pocket with switching crossfall, changing curb types. Ultimately, there's going to be scenarios where that doesn't always work, and we will have to saw cut a panel back. And if you do have decorative walks, we will try and match that. But as you mentioned, not always will we be able to match it exactly.
So it'll really be when we get in front of your house and we see a colored sidewalk there, we're marking it out. We'll keep that in mind and we'll do our best to leave it. But sometimes you can't get around it, and I have to knock on your front door and go, all right, we have to take out a foot or a meter, and we have that discussion on the spot to figure out a solution that's works for everyone.
Great. So we did have one more local improvement question come through while we were answering the last one. So we'll share that one. So if you choose to amortize your payments, can you change your mind down the line? So in 5 years, so if you pay 5 years of payments and then pay the remaining lump sum, is that possible?
Yes, it's possible. After 5 years, if you choose to pay the rest of the local improvement, you can do it, but you do it all the rest remaining amount, not like partial.
Okay, great. So I think that was it for the local improvement questions. So let's move on to the rest of the construction questions. And Nick kind of cheated. He looked ahead in the notes. That's okay. So the next construction question that we had come through was, has the laydown area location been decided? And if so, where will it be?
I guess the short answer is no. We'll work that out with the contractor. Lafarge is, since they're not doing major, say, drainage or water main stuff. I know I had an inquiry from a resident, like, Epcor Water had this big pile of stuff sitting in one of the pocket parks all summer. I would imagine, or if I were to speculate, I would guess Lafarge will probably use some space in one or two of the parks to store some of their stuff, but they don't usually use a site trailer or aren't hauling around quite as much material. So it hopefully isn't quite as unsightly, but I would guess they'll be using some space in one of the pocket parks in Malmo all season, and it may be the same location for the second year, or they may move somewhere else, but hopefully a little less intense than what, say, Epcor Water uses, but there's still going to be some material, not totally sure where yet, but in some open space in Malmo kind of thing.
Great. So I would just like to recognize that it is 8 o'clock now. So if you are aware of the time and need to go, please make sure that you log off, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. We do have a lot of more questions that have come through, so we will remain on the line for about 20 more minutes to answer as many questions as we can. And if we don't get to your question within this 2-hour webinar, we will try and take all these questions, answer them, and post them online sometime within this week. So let's move forward to the next question. So it looks like the next question is, will there be several crews working on construction concurrently?
Short answer, yes. They'll be splitting their time between Grandview Heights and Malmo Plains. So you'll probably, depending on what activity is active at a given time in a given area, you may see multiple crews, or you may only see only one if they're working on road, like FDR or something. But they're going to be lots of people. Sometimes it looks like they'll be super busy. Sometimes it'll look less busy, but there's going to be Lafarge has specialized crews pretty much for every stage. So for walks, for roads, for shared use path, and then there's the separate landscaping crews. So there's all sorts of personnel will be out there off and on for the next 2 years.
Anything to add, Jason?
Not really. No, I think that's got it. I think the most crews I've ever seen on a job was at one time was 20, over 100 people.
Wow.
I don't expect that to be
I don't think there'll be quite that many in Malmo.
Very much the case in Malmo, but that was at the end of the year on one particular job where they're desperately trying to finish on time.
Fair.
Wonderful. Okay, so the next question. Last fall, we noticed some houses had fire hoses going up to them. Pressure tests for water lines. Was it this in prep for road reconstruction to check that the underlying infrastructure was sound before putting in new roads? If so, have those checks been completed throughout the neighborhood? We never saw this kind of work in front of our place.
No, that's I can answer this one. So this is not neighborhood renewal. That is Epcor Water. Those fire hoses are temporary water services that they take the existing water main out of service and they're replacing that. So they hook up that hose to a fire hydrant and turn that on. So the houses still have water. It feeds in through their basically your garden hose faucet. So the pressure is not quite as good, but it's just so you still have water while the water main replacement is being done. So if the water mains weren't replaced in front of your property, obviously they didn't come and hook up the little fire hose system. So that's all that is.
Great. Next question. On 48th Avenue, 49th Avenue, and 46th Avenue, the west end of the avenues, the sidewalk just ends at Michener Park fence. Does the sidewalk have to go right to the fence and the end abruptly, or is there another option? Tony, I'll throw this one to you to answer first.
Sure. I do recall some conversations happening about this kind of in the earlier public engagement events. I do remember talking to some residents and some of those questions came up. Ultimately, we ended up in our design keeping the connections the way they are. So the sidewalks will be along the roadways leading up to that kind of dead end fence. We kind of scratched our heads on what could be done there, and because the roadways end abruptly, but the roadways do serve a purpose for providing those connections to the alleys on all three of those avenues. The roadways kind of do need to stay in place, and so with the roadways in place, we figured that the sidewalk should also be kind of put back to where they are today. So that's kind of the decision that was made. And then I guess also, kind of unfortunately, we don't, because of our timing of the neighborhood renewal, we don't have information at this time as to exactly what the design of Michener Park looks like. Obviously, if we had that information, we'd have an opportunity to kind of coordinate with that redevelopment that's happening in there. So I think, through the neighborhood renewal process, we didn't really have much of an ability to look at connections into Michener Park. But I would imagine through, the future process of the redevelopment and the development permit application and all that stuff that's going to be happening, I'm sure there's going to be opportunities for the public to kind of weigh in on that. Maybe I'm speaking a little bit out of turn on that from my perspective, but hopefully that answers the question in terms of what we were able to coordinate and design as part of the neighborhood renewal.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Let's move on to the next question. Will emergency vehicles still have access during road construction? Jason and Josh.
Yeah, a short answer is yes. I guess there may be a bit of detouring they'll have to follow if a particular area is affected, but I didn't recall there being any issues again last year in Grandview Heights, but maybe Jason has some experience with something like this, but I don't think generally there's an issue here. They just, kind of like with the buses and everybody else, they might have to go a more roundabout way to get where they're going. But otherwise, it's kind of more or less the status quo. And if there's some critical situation where they need to get through to get to some road that's closed and the contractor can allow it, they will let them go through there. Like they can cross barricades that I'm telling other people not to cross for emergency purposes at all times. Like there's no question there.
Great. The next question, will you be making improvements to some of the parks? So I think let's start with Tony about some of the park renewal, and then Josh or Jason, you can finish it off.
Yeah, without going in, I guess, into a whole lot of detail, all the way through, this process, we're on public engagement event number 6. We did engage with the public in terms of with the residents in Malmo and the greater public in terms of what could be done with, those 3 pocket parks within Malmo Plains. So we did go through some options and we went through a couple of different scenarios and ultimately landed on, some improvements being made. I don't have the plans right in front of me, but I can say that they're shared on the website. Jen, I'm assuming there's a link that everybody had access to in terms of the Malmo Plains neighborhood renewal website. So if you go on that website, you'll get an opportunity to kind of see what is happening to those 3 parks.
Great. And yep, everything from all of our previous engagement events are posted to edmonton.ca/building Malmo Plains. Josh, Jason, do you want to finish up that question?
I think that Tony covered the major parts of it. There is some, being cognizant of sort of the maintenance requirements and, being, reasonable with costs we're incurring. Like there are some improvements, some new planting planned for all the pocket parks. There's the improvements we're intending along at the White Mud Bridge approach little pocket park there. So we're trying to spruce up the neighborhood in little bits here and there as best we can without, going too crazy on, costs or on imposing maintenance requirements on other departments at the city. So there are some improvements and we're trying to keep it to within things that within reason can be maintained type thing.
Great. The next question. How much notice will we get prior to the start of construction, and when do the notices get delivered? 1 week, 1 day ahead of time?
I guess, yeah, Jason, do you want to do this one or I can start on this one too?
Sure. So You'll get an initial bulletin, which will have Josh's contact information on it from the city. And then after that, the bulletins will come from the contractor with their site superintendent's contact information on it, and they will give you a bulletin for every change in major activity. There's generally only two kind of major activities. We kind of consider the concrete work one major activity, and the road work a second major activity. So, and the timing on those bulletins, they generally try and aim for between 3 and 5 days before they're active on your street. The reason for that is if they give it too soon, people forget it's coming. If they give it too late, you don't really have enough notice to do something about it. So that's the window they aim for. They don't always hit it, but typically 3 to 5 days, you'll get that bulletin from the contractor, and you'll get a couple a year. And the other thing to kind of keep an eye out for would be the no park signs, because those will go up on your street. If you miss the bulletin for some reason, you will have a hard time missing the no park signs that go up in front of your street about 24 to 48 hours before they start working there.
Great, thank you. So the next question, there are quite a few overhanging trees over the new sidewalks. How does forestry decide how much gets pruned above the sidewalk? And is there a set clearance distance?
I can answer that one too. Yeah.
Thanks.
Every neighborhood renewal contract has a urban forester attached to it. So he basically will mark the trees, kind of do a walk and an assessment, make sure we're not doing anything that's going to impact the trees so much so that they, they have issues or they don't survive or anything like that. There is an elevation that they aim for to trim the trees. That's typically the height of the highest piece of equipment that needs to move under them. So depending on the type of equipment the contractor is using, will set the height that they trim the tree to.
Okay. So the next question, it's looks like it's a local improvement question. So can we still block or protest the asphalt shared use pathway along 115th Street from 51st Avenue to 67th Avenue? This seems like a disconnect between a city philosophy of connection and local residents' use of the area. 115th Street is such a quiet street, so there really is no need for a separate path for bikes. Who would like to take this one?
Maybe I'll start and others will join in. I guess, yeah, I don't think the shared use path is not a local improvement covered under that program. This is, yeah, comes back to the city's intent to address this missing link to provide a hard surface for use by like all like human powered wheeled transport that, yes, there will still be some cyclists that elect to use 115th Street, but there are also plenty of cyclists in this city who would prefer to use the shared use path, or maybe they're on rollerblades, or maybe someone's pushing a stroller or something like that. So it's, we want to accommodate active transportation and not force people to have to do it on the road. They have their own, small space here that, again, we're doing our best to, or the full intention is to preserve the existing trees there and minimize any disruption to that. So maybe if anyone else wants to add to that, it's more of a urban planning type question, but I'll invite any other comments from the panel.
I think you've kind of captured it about as well as can be done there, Josh. Bike paths are often very polarizing. People often really love them or really hate them, and there's a giant silent majority as well. But the short answer to that question is that bike path is going forward, or that shared use path is going forward. At a certain point in the planning and development process, you do have to commit, because you have to get contractors on board, you have to share plans, you have to start the staging, you have to basically not make a last minute decision, or your costs really start to go out of control. So it is going forward, and I think this is engagement session, what, 9 or 10? So I think, and the entire history of engagement for Malmo Plains is online. So we've done the best we can and made decisions kind of based on the feedback we've had. I think
And
that's,
this is not a local improvement question. We are not assessed anyone on the west side of 115th Street.
Great, thanks for clearing that up. The next question. I think my front sidewalk has non-compliant steps. Where can I find guidelines for its reconstruction?
This is kind of an interesting question because I guess it kind of depends on if you're using like the city of Edmonton's design and construction standards, which don't necessarily have to apply in private property, or it's like a private building code side of things. So I guess it depends on if your stairs are close to the city sidewalk and might be in that 2-foot zone where we're going to be messing around, then maybe they come out and we're making some changes to it. So you might have a special case there. And I guess I would invite the person who asked that question maybe to give me a call or email and maybe a photo and with your address so we can look at it. And Nick and I can look at the design side and see if it affects on the city activity side and go from there. But it's sort of the answer is kind of, it depends on which rules you're applying to your steps, I guess, which isn't the best. But I miss Jason, you're unmuted. Do you have an opinion on that?
yeah, well, I was just going to add that the city's design and construction standards are all online. So you can kind of take a look through there, but I wouldn't even bother. What I would do is talk to Josh and tell him what you want there, because the beauty of these neighborhood renewals is that you can really customize things
Yeah.
like steps to your home, and it's a good opportunity to, if you feel like they're not safe or they're out of spec, you can actually get that fixed up in this process.
Yeah, especially if they're close to the city sidewalk, and maybe it makes Nick's design job easier if we can remove them and do a little bit of fiddling with your front yard. And if you're open to that and we have that situation occurring, absolutely we can have that discussion and it can produce a better finished product for the roads and for your yard. So absolutely, if those opportunities exist, we'll take them every time.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we have one question left. How will the new shared roadways, the alley connections to the LRT, be constructed to show that it is a multi-use access path?
I can give Josh a break on this one.
Sure, thanks,
and
Tony.
speak to it, and Nick could pipe in if he has anything to add. So there's two connections to the LRT through the alleys, kind of at the east end of Malmo Plains. And the way that they're going to be shown to be different is that at this point in time, we've designed them with paving stones in there. So the actual texture and the look of the treatment, the surface treatment, is going to look different than the sidewalks. It's going to look different than the alleys as well. And we're also going to be upgrading the lighting in there too. And there is more information and a render actually on the website as well.
Yeah,
Unless you guys have changed it, Nick.
Yeah, I was going to say the only thing we're going to add is maybe the material is still yet to be finalized. There will be some kind of tactile response, whether it's pavers or stamped concrete. There will be a visual difference that it's, a shared area. The exact material is still to be finalized, through the design process though.
Thanks, Nick.
Great. I think that's all the questions that we had today. So we managed to get to them all. If you want to look for more information or to watch this information again, please make sure you visit the website edmonton.ca/building Malmo Plains. Or if you have any questions about local improvement process, visit edmonton.ca/local improvement. So I'd like to thank our panelists and the project team working hard in the background for tonight's event. And just a reminder, we will have an event evaluation that we will be emailing out to you shortly. We'd just like a little bit of your feedback to see if the information that we shared with you today was helpful, and if you have any other feedback that you could share with us to make events like this better in the future. And finally, I'd like to thank you for joining us today and for your interest in this project. I know it's a really cold week out there, so I'm kind of glad that we got to do this online. You don't have to brave the snow and the cold to visit us at the Community League, but thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you found this information valuable and helpful, and we'd like you to have a great night. Thank you for coming.
Thanks again, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.